Seriously, you have never heard P90s like this before. They're about half the resistance of a typical P90 pickup, but with all that same volume output you'd expect. However, where these pickups are going to be super unique is that they're going to have an unmatched level of definition as compared to a more traditionally voiced P90. And in this video, I'm going to compare these pickups against more vintage voiced P90 pickups like here, and the difference is huge. So let's get started. If you're not familiar, back in the 40s, Gibson created the P90s to compete with Fender, and it wasn't until the 50s that Gibson started installing the P90s in their guitars like the Les Pauls and their SGs. And over the last 70 years, these pickups have continued to gain popularity and have been a tried and true staple for many guitarists. And the modern P90 pickup world is largely creating vintage voiced P90s, but with a modern flair. And with that, they've created hum canceling or noise canceling versions to help eliminate one of the biggest problems with single coil pickups, which is 60 cycle hum. However, with all that said, there are still some people who just don't love that P90 sound. And whether it's because they don't like that balance that it strikes between humbucker and single coil, or how noisy P90s can sometimes be, or even muddy or dark, I think you may really love these Lambertone Ristrettos. They're still true P90 pickups, but they're going to encompass something entirely new that's not been seen on the market before. This means you're still going to get all of that single coil spank and that growl that you would expect from a P90, but they're also going to be able to handle any effects you want to throw their way. And so with all that said, let's take a listen to how these sound. With that said, I think it's worth calling out that there's some really fantastic P90s on the market today. Now, I have a set of Lindy Fralin P90s in my Novo, and they are fantastic, but they're going to have some of those problems of typical P90s like I alluded to earlier. And this is where I think the Ristrettos just introduce a new flavor into the P90 world. I've also tried the Seymour Duncan Antiquities, their Fat Cats, Reverend's P90s, and the Grey Coke P90s, and they're all fantastic, but most of those are attempting to recreate that vintage voice P90 sound. And this is where I think the Ristrettos fix some of those pain points of a typical P90. They're going to allow the voice of the pickup to cut through really nicely, but they're not going to have as much noise because, as I mentioned earlier, they're about half the resistance of a typical P90 pickup. And that can come as both a pro and a con, and this is where you may either love these pickups or you may hate them depending on where you sit on that spectrum with P90. In this case, the Ristretto's neck pickup is going to measure at 3.65 thousand DCR, and the bridge is going to measure at 5.05 thousand DCR, and this is going to help create a unique sound you're not going to find elsewhere. And where the Ristrettos are going to continue to be unique is that they're going to have a different wiring tension and wiring combination, as well as using imbalanced magnets to create that clarity like you've never heard before. And there's even a story out there of David Ryan Harris, who played guitar with John Mayer, historically didn't love the P90 sound, but absolutely loved these Ristrettos. And you can find more of that story right here from my friends over at Worship Tutorials. One other comment I want to make is around the balance they strike between humbucker and single coil. And in this case, most people would agree that a vintage voice P90 is going to sit somewhere in the middle. And in this case, I think the Ristrettos lean more to the side of the single coil sound, but you're going to be able to stack on even more overdrive and effect, which we'll hear shortly. So with all that said, let's hear the difference between these two, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. I would also love to know in the comments, which do you like better, just out of a gut response? Let's take a listen. the Ristrettos are going to be for that individual that has historically written off P90 pickups, maybe because they don't like the way they sound or if they felt like they were too dark or muddy. I also think the Ristrettos are going to be for that individual that wants more clarity out of their pickups, or maybe even plays music in the praise and worship realm, plays blues, rock, indie, alternative, or anything along that similar vein. One final thing that I really love about the Ristrettos is that it feels like these pickups are going to be able to let the guitar's natural voice and characteristics shine through very easily because of how transparent they are. And as I mentioned earlier, that can sometimes be a pro and a con. And personally, I love the sound of a P90 pickup, and sometimes that muddiness that it can get can create a really cool sound, especially if you enjoy playing punk or alternative music that's a little heavier. And even if you stack on a ton of effects, overdrive, reverb, delay, I feel like you're still going to be really pleased with the clarity of the Ristrettos. And if you do want these pickups, I've got a 10% off coupon down in the description below, which also helps support the channel. Now, for the individuals that I don't think will love these pickups is going to be that person that wants that more vintage voice P90 sound, where you're going to have a little bit of darkness to the overall tone or a little bit more grit. And it's not that the Ristrettos can't take on that grit, but you typically have to stack on another overdrive to create that same kind of sound. And if you're wanting something with that more vintage tone, thankfully there are a ton of awesome options out there. And like I mentioned earlier, I've got the Lindy Fralin P90s in my Novo, which sound fantastic, but they are definitely dark and even noisy at times. Lastly, if you want more comparison between these two pickups, check out this video right here, and I will see you guys in the next one.